So yeah, shared security. It is an economic scaling solution for blockchains. Thank you, that's my talk, and no. We're gonna go deeper. That's really just at the iceberg. Economic scaling. This is a very important piece that's missing kind of in the space. We talk a lot about computational scaling, data scaling, but what about economic scaling? What does that mean and how does that impact our system, right? So let's explore that idea a little bit more. So first, let's talk about the word security. I'm sure you all have heard like blockchains are these secure mechanisms. These, like, we want to look for blockchains that bring security, that have security, right? Well, what is security? Well, security really represents the economic cost to change the canonical history of a blockchain, right? Chains with higher security are more resilient to attacks like double spend, right? This is ultimately what security is. Security isn't like my account is more secure or this cryptography is more secure. Security really means what does it take to change the history, right? That when I have a transaction in, what will it cost for me to change that? This is a very important detail which gets lost in words a lot, I think, okay? And I also want to note this. I mentioned double spend attacks, but I want to clarify that a double spend is not inherently an attack. A double spend is perfectly valid in many blockchains. I can make a transaction with the same nonce, send it to 2 different accounts, and the whole point of a blockchain is to come to consensus. The whole point of a blockchain is to determine which of these 2 transactions is truth, right? So it's perfectly valid to allow a double spend to happen, but you can also create an attack through this mechanism. And so let's take a look at what that attack looks like. So an attack on a proof of stake chain may look something like this, right? In this situation, we have like the Asia area and the North America area separated through some kind of fragmentation of the network. Right now, they cannot talk to each other except through Australia. In this case, you can have 33% honest nodes in the Asia area, 33% honest nodes in the Americas area, and 33 malicious nodes in Australia. In this case, since the only way for these 2 regions of the Earth to talk to each other is through Australia, Australia can take advantage of this and create a forked blockchain where both sides are true, right? So when we talk about Byzantine fault tolerance, normally we're talking about 66% of a network agrees about some truth. In this situation, you can see I've created 2 different 66% 66% backed blockchains. But in this case, Australia is being malicious and trying to present to you 2 different truths, right? This is how you actually attack with a double spend or attack with any kind of conflicting transaction. So in this case, what is the economic cost? Like, what are the economies here? Well, basically, at some point, we should assume that the network won't be fragmented forever. At some point, these 2 regions will be able to talk to each other. And what will actually happen is that you'll start to see, well, Australia has been lying to us, right? We've seen that Australia is telling us 2 different truths, and we'll be able to identify that this is a problem. And when that happens, what we'll do is slash them, right? Australia is being malicious. We have signatures and other verifications to say there's conflicting ideas in these 2 different spots, and what we'll actually do is slash the people in Australia and say, hey, you did something bad. But it could be that the attack that Australia did to everyone else, by the way, no offense to anyone from Australia, so just an example, right? But the attack that Australia did to the network could be worth more than the slash that they imposed, right? But often you would hope that the slash conditions are so high such that it would deter any of these activities from happening. But I want to clarify again, this is not a flaw in blockchains. All blockchains can be attacked. It's all about security. How much is the economic cost to prevent that? What's the probability of it happening, knowing the economic costs, right? So again, there's a very tight relationship between economies of blockchains, token values, and securities, right? So what is the bootstrapping problem? Well, if we know there's a relationship between economies and security, then what we have to worry about is new chains. When new chains are coming into our ecosystem, oftentimes their economies aren't sufficient or stable enough yet, right? And really, one of the things I want to argue why shared security is so important is that one of the scarcest resources in the blockchain space is economy, is money, right? Yeah, we'll go deeper into this idea, but like this is a really important thing. So when we look at new chains, oftentimes new chains have relatively small market caps. Oftentimes new chains are very speculative. The price goes up and down crazy. If we know the security of a chain is attached to these kinds of economies, it's not good, right? We want to have and provide secure blockchains while allowing new members to join. This is the bootstrapping problem, right? And so how do we solve this problem? I think we can all say it together. Shared security. This is the idea. So the idea is if you believe that economies are attached to security, that new blockchains need to come and exist, and that's a good idea, we need to think about ways to actually share security between different blockchains. Now there are some different forms of shared security today. And shared security, I mean, in a broader scale, could actually mean a lot of things, but I'll talk about a few different ones. There's native shared security, which is the kind of thing that we provide with Polkadot. I'll talk about that a little bit more. But it's basically shared security at the protocol level, like protocols designed to provide shared security. Then you have rollups. I'm sure everyone's heard about rollups. Rollups are a very exciting thing, especially for the Ethereum space. But they are actually using shared security too. You have off-chain somewhere, some kind of rollup solution. They're aggregating and putting transactions together. And then they're bringing those transactions and verifying them on things like Ethereum, acting as a security layer, right? The security of those rollups are as much as the security of Ethereum. And similarly, there are other ideas. I think Eigenlayer and some others are doing restaking. Basically, if we know that the main issue is we need a stable currency, a valuable currency, we can actually just take currencies from other blockchains and reuse them to secure other chains, right? And we'll kind of go through these things, but these are different forms of shared security. But I want to mention that not all of these are equal. You know, some of them are better than others. And so what I would like to do is present our form of shared security in Polkadot, tell you a little bit about it, and then compare some other protocols and just let you all decide for yourselves what are the trade-offs and benefits between these different things, okay? So let's go deep dive into Polkadot. Really, really briefly, Polkadot is a network that connects blockchains. We call those different blockchains we connect parachains. And really, Polkadot is a vision towards a multi-chain future. If you believe there'll be many blockchains in the future, which I hope you do, Polkadot is really trying to solve and work on those kind of problems. Polkadot provides shared security. It's one of actually the main functionalities of the protocol. It's unique in that all of the parachains connected to Polkadot natively have the same security as the main relay chain. So if you see Dot as one of the top 10, 15 cryptocurrencies out there, know that every single small chain attached to Polkadot has the same kind of security as a top 10, 15 blockchain. That's really exciting and something that we think is going to be really scalable for new blockchains out there. Now, I want to actually go through the mechanics of how shared security in Polkadot works, but I want to give you the information that there's some building blocks and there's some ideas. And there are other protocols out there which are trying to do their version of shared security. And I would argue to you that if they don't have these similar pillars, that they are probably not doing it the best. The pillars here is WASM, which is kind of a shared executable format, an open format for how we can decide how chains should execute. The Parachains protocol, which is a native protocol built into our blockchain to handle all of the mechanics of handling parachains, shared security, etc. And then the relay chain, which you might have heard the term beacon chain or other things like that. This is a very key part of coordinating all of the Parachain protocol, coordinating the shared security together, okay? So these are the kind of pillars. If you look at other protocols, they don't have similar pillars to this. They're probably doing something a little bit different. They're probably making compromises in other areas. Okay, so look at this. So in the Polkadot ecosystem, we're going to start with WASM, right? All of the blockchains in our ecosystem, they define their state transition function, their core logic of their blockchain using WASM. We kind of creatively basically implement this WASM blob into the chain itself, and we use it as like the how do we do execution. And this is a very key part of a lot of things we do in our space, but it's also very important for shared security. I want to give you an analogy, okay? The analogy is like a game console. So you can imagine that there is a Polkadot client. There's some binary that you run on your computer, right? This is a game console. But it doesn't have built into it one game. In fact, you can actually switch out the games. You can build different games. In this case, those games are different WASM runtimes, WASM state transition functions. And all we do in this client is basically say, hey, we can execute a WASM file. You give me the WASM, we plug it in, and we turn your game console into a specific version of a blockchain, right? If you put in the Polkadot console or the Polkadot game, it's a Polkadot blockchain. If you put in the A-star one, it's an A-star blockchain. This is a very key idea for how we kind of separate the client and the actual logic of your blockchain. Okay? It's easy enough. And I'm going to kind of show you this, but I'm going to explain it more. But really, Polkadot acts as a super console. It doesn't just have one slot. It has many slots. Polkadot can be many different chains at the same time. And this is a key part of how we actually create shared security. We actually validate the things that are happening. So now let's talk about parachain validation, okay? This is the next piece. So the way that we scale Polkadot is we do execution sharding. The word sharding probably is also something you have heard before, hopefully. But really, sharding comes down to two things. Sharding data into separate places, and knowing because data is sharded, you can actually execute over those shards in parallel, right? The problem with parallelization in blockchain is that if you try to touch the same data twice in parallel, you have a race condition, right? And if basically, if you know you can do this, you can attack a chain by basically trying to force it to touch a lot of the same data over and over. If we can actually shard data, we can actually parallelize execution. And so Polkadot has built into this execution sharding mechanism, where basically all the validators in our system, they execute every relay chain block, but only a subset of them execute the different parachain blocks. And we have this whole parachains protocol to basically make sure that's still secure while parallelizing all the work. Okay, and I'll show you more about that right now. So quickly, how would I even validate a block? Well, the information you need to validate a block is actually quite simple. First, you need the block of transactions. What are the state changes I'm trying to make? Then I need only a subset of the database which is relevant for those transactions, right? Imagine you have a blockchain with 1 million users. If the block only has transfers between 2 users, I don't need everyone's balance. I need a Merkle tree, and I need the 2 balances of the users in that Merkle tree, and that's all the information I need to have a sufficient proof for this state transition function acting over this data, right? So I only need a subset of the data over overall Merkle tree. By the way, Merkle trees are very important and cool because of these kinds of properties, right? Then what you do is you take the block of transactions, you take the sub-Merkle tree, you put it into your state transition function, and you get output a new data, a new state root, right? And that is really what a blockchain does every single block. It just takes the transactions, it acts it on the state, with a state transition function, and then outputs the data. Very simple, right? So what do we do in Polkadot? We just scale that. We parallelize that. Every single parachain provides to us a new block and their version, their view of the information that's needed to satisfy that block. And these are called proof of validity, POV blocks. And in the relay chain, inside of Polkadot, we already have the blockchain's state transition function, we have the game console saved already, and we already store the root that we know about. So when the Parachain gives us a POV, we can easily check, does this Merkle tree match the root that we expect? And then we just execute their block using the execution, the state transition function, the WASM file that we already have on the chain. And it looks like this. So basically, we have now collected for every single parachain in parallel, what is their state transition function? What is the block of transactions they want to execute? What is their POV, right? And it's up to now the validators to validate that that's actually correct. And how do we do that? Well, basically, we take all of our validators in Polkadot, which are building the blocks of Polkadot, and then break them apart randomly so that each one of them has a different parachain that they'll validate, right? So you can imagine if there's 1,000 validators and there's 10 parachains, we will randomly assign 100 validators to each parachain to actually execute and validate those transitions, right? And when that validation process happens and everything gets executed successfully, then we actually commit the changes to Polkadot in the form of a new state root, right? So as long as we can keep track of the Merkle roots, and we can keep track of the state transition functions and the blocks, we can basically keep track of all the blockchains and how they're moving together, right? So far, does it make sense so far? Yeah, okay, I see heads. Everyone is nodding, that's great. But this process sounds very nice, right? Like, oh, everything's just gonna work, right? Well, that's not how blockchains work. There's a lot of attacks, but we have within the protocol, which I won't go into today, a lot of different checks to make sure these things happen correctly. For example, in Polkadot, natively, we have a data availability solution. We use erasure encoding to make sure all the data that's needed for Polkadot verification is available. We have approval checking. We have a process that other validators are checking each other's work. We don't just trust one person says, hey, this looks good, accept it. A lot of people are checking. There's a lot of economics and slashing that can be involved to make that happen. And finally, dispute handling. If there is someone who comes and says, hey, I think this person did the problem wrong, we have a whole disputes process handled natively in our protocol, which will actually resolve and figure out what is the problem, is it actually a problem, who should get slashed, where are the economies and security around the network, right? We talked about economies and security. And what does this all mean? Well, this is really, what we achieved with this Parachain process is the ability to finalize Parachain blocks along with Polkadot itself, right? This is what I talk about. Polkadot shares the security because every time Polkadot makes a new block, it is including all of the blocks of all of the other parachains that it has validated, right? And so each of these slices you see here, these are slices you can think of as a relay chain Polkadot block. And connected to them is all of the parachain states for all the parachains connected to it. So as we make new blocks on Polkadot, we are ingesting and processing new blocks on all the parachains, and each time we submit a new block, Parachains also get that block included. And finally, when we finalize our blocks in the network, you having your state in that block, it also gets finalized, right? That means that your parachain canonical state, your finalization, your consensus is delegated to Polkadot. We give you security. That's the whole idea. And there's more than this, right? Actually, if you think about it even deeper, if we're actually building a native shared security protocol, we can also secure the interactions between chains. This is actually something you don't get in a lot of other protocols. If you're trying to build shared security on top of something like Ethereum, Ethereum doesn't have a native interoperability stack attached to layer 2s, right? They have to build something themselves. Because we designed it from the beginning to be an interoperable solution, we can actually finalize the interactions between chains and handle that as a part of our protocol itself. This is a very key piece. I'll maybe answer questions later, because I'll have to go. But I love that you're asking a question here, because it's a good place to ask. Okay? So then, I went really fast through this, but the high-level idea, again, you can see how WASM, as a generic way to create these game consoles which can be shared around and passed around, very important. The Parachains protocol, natively handling all of the things around a sharded network and providing security, important. And the relay chain, acting as a hub for these different finalization points, how everyone should work together, very important. If you have shared security protocols which don't have all of this, something is funny, to me at least. You have to convince me that you don't need all these things, okay? So I want to leave comparing some options, okay? I talked there are other shared security options out there. They have pros, they have cons. Let's talk about it and let's start a discussion around it, right? Like, let's not assume that what I'm telling you is the end-all be-all, right? We should think about and analyze these different options, okay? Obviously a little bit biased, maybe this is my view on things, but you know, it's okay. So restaking solutions, right? So these seem to be pretty cool because they're like protocol agnostic. It's really simple to move tokens around and basically create systems where you can slash them, right? Smaller, newer chains can actually take advantage of, you know, more established economies, right? The problem here is that, you know, as you restake the same token over and over and over again, that token becomes, it's like one strong guy trying to hold more and more chains on its back. At some point, it's gonna fail. At some point, it's gonna be more valuable to attack 10 chains at once against one token than to basically scale that token out. Like, it's just, you can't have one token secure everything, right? And also, there's really no cryptography happening here. It's all kind of soft systems where basically you fall back on centralized trust saying, hey, this went wrong. I mentioned a lot of cryptographic, interesting, verifiable ways to do things. You can't really do that with restaking. It's just moving tokens around and slashing them, okay? Optimistic rollups. This is really cool. This is obviously not limited by the complexity of the on-chain VM. It can be parallelized. You can stuff a lot of data in there because all of it's happening off the main chain. Really cool. I think the main concerns here is around censorship resistance and centralization. Like, to have those kind of sequencers created, it's, you know, that's where you start thinking, well, Ethereum is very decentralized, but the sequencer for this roll-up chain is like 10 people, and they all may choose to include or not include your thing, or they might be a target for governments, like all this kind of stuff, right? And there's also this really big problem with time to finality. Because it's an optimistic roll-up, they're optimistically assuming these blocks are valid. What happens when something goes bad? Because all of this disputes handling has to happen on the main settlement chain, it can take very long, up to days to actually finalize transactions, right? Also fees and all kind of stuff, you can read the slide. Zero knowledge rollups. Now these are really cool. This honestly, I'm very excited to learn more about. I don't know enough about, but I really like zero knowledge rollups. They're great. They can be proven trustlessly. You don't need that much data because I think that the data proofs are generally like, you know, kind of O of 1 or like, you know, fixed size. They have instant finality as long as you can kind of execute the zero knowledge proof. And it's really exciting if you can do recursion, right? If you can have a proof inside of a proof inside of a proof, you can really wrap a lot of data. The problem again is around centralization, right? Like, zero knowledge computation is very intensive. Probably not everyone can actually create a new proof. Also, ZK circuits are very complex today to write. I think there aren't any really great frameworks for easily writing ZK proofs, right? And the complexity of proofs get really, really heavy. Again, some problems with on-chain allocation of block space, etc. Yeah, 1 minute. This is my last slide. Basically, the last one talked about Polkadot native security, right? So we have great things. I already talked to you about a lot of stuff, like all the things that we do which are great, which is like true verification handling, native handling of shared security, interoperability, sharding, all that kind of stuff. It's easy to develop a new logic because you just have to make WASM, right? Anything that compiles to WASM will work as a Polkadot compatible chain, basically. And there's much less concern of centralization from our collator system, how we produce blocks, than from the sequencers and provers in the other spaces. But there are some downsides. I would like to tell you them. Unfortunately, WASM is about 2 times slower than a natively compiled executable. That sucks. We require a lot of data being provided. Like, you know, you need to have that Merkle tree proof, Whereas like ZK rollups kind of have this like abstract verification proof. We have to provide like the real data, the real balances. And there are certain limitations. When you join Polkadot, you have to follow certain limitations to be able to actually be a valid parachain, right? So anyway, these are all the different ideas, and they're all good. So I just want to say this. Shared security is a topic coming up a lot. A lot of ideas are converging here. I think we should explore solutions. I think Polkadot has done a lot of really cool things. I think we're a long way to go. But if you have any questions for me, you can ask me. I'll be outside. And thank you so much for my talk.